The city lights sparkled like diamonds scattered across black velvet. High above the streets of Manhattan, in a penthouse that cost more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes, a party was just getting started. The kind of party where champagne bottles cost thousands of dollars, and the guests wore watches worth more than cars. Robert Hayes stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the tiny yellow taxis crawling through the streets 40 floors below. He was the man everyone wanted to talk to tonight. At 42, he'd built a technology empire that made him one of the youngest billionaires in America. His app had changed how people shopped online, and now his face appeared on magazine covers with headlines calling him a genius. Tonight was his annual charity gala. Once a year he invited the richest and most powerful people in New York to his home, and they all came. Movie stars chatted with hedge fund managers. Fashion designers laughed with politicians. Everyone dressed in their finest clothes, showing off jewelry that could feed a small country. The penthouse itself looked like something from a dream. White marble floors reflected the light from 3 massive crystal chandeliers. Modern art worth millions hung on the walls. In one corner sat a beautiful grand piano, black and gleaming, its surface so polished you could see your reflection in it. The piano had cost Robert $500,000, though he rarely played it. It was more decoration than instrument, a showpiece to impress his guests. "Wonderful party, Robert," said a woman in a silver dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She air-kissed both his cheeks without actually touching him. "Glad you could make it, Victoria," Robert replied smoothly, his practiced smile never wavering. He'd learned long ago how to talk to these people, how to say things that sounded meaningful but meant nothing at all. A waiter in a crisp white jacket offered him another glass of champagne. Robert took it, his third of the evening. The bubbles made everything feel lighter, easier. He was supposed to give a speech later about the charity they were supporting tonight, something about arts education for underprivileged children. His assistant had written it for him. He hadn't read it yet. "Where's your pianist?" someone asked. Robert had hired a famous concert pianist to perform tonight, someone who'd played at Carnegie Hall. The man was supposed to arrive at 8 o'clock, but it was now 8:30 and there was no sign of him. Robert shrugged. "Traffic, probably. You know how it is." But inside he felt a spike of annoyance. He was paying the man $5,000 for 1 hour of music. The least he could do was show up on time. While the wealthy guests mingled and laughed, talking about their vacation homes and their stock portfolios, a different kind of person moved quietly through the service hallway behind the kitchen. Her name was Rita Alvarez, and she wasn't a guest at this party. She was part of the invisible army of workers who made parties like this possible. Rita was 58 years old, though people often told her she looked older. Years of hard work had left their mark on her face and hands. She wore a simple gray cleaning uniform with her name embroidered on the pocket. Her hair, more gray than black now, was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She pushed a cleaning cart loaded with supplies, mops, and trash bags. She'd been cleaning this building for 3 years now. Every Tuesday and Friday, she arrived at 6 in the morning and worked until 2 in the afternoon, scrubbing floors and cleaning bathrooms in the building's luxury apartments. The residents barely noticed her. To them, she was just part of the scenery, like the doorman or the elevator. Tonight was different, though. Her supervisor had asked her to stay late for the party. "We need someone here in case there are spills," he'd said. "Rich people are messy when they drink." So Rita had agreed, even though it meant getting home after midnight. She needed the overtime pay. Her daughter was in college and textbooks didn't pay for themselves. Rita moved carefully through the hallway, trying to stay out of sight. She could hear the party through the walls, the laughter and music and clinking glasses. Once she peeked through the service door to see what was happening. The sight took her breath away. She'd never seen so much luxury in one place. The women looked like they'd stepped out of magazines. The men wore suits that probably cost more than Rita made in 6 months. And then she saw the piano. Rita stopped breathing for a moment. The instrument sat in the corner of the room, lit by soft spotlights that made it glow. It was the most beautiful piano she'd ever seen. Even from far away, she could tell it was a Steinway, the kind of instrument that serious musicians dreamed about. Her fingers twitched unconsciously, remembering movements they hadn't made in 30 years. She could almost feel the smooth keys under her hands, could almost hear the music that piano could make. For just a moment, Rita wasn't a cleaning lady in a gray uniform. She was 22 years old again, sitting at a piano in Buenos Aires playing for her professors at the conservatory. That felt like another lifetime now. In many ways it was. "Rita, you there?" Her supervisor's voice crackled through the walkie-talkie clipped to her belt. She jumped, pulled back to the present. "Yes, I'm here," she replied quietly. "Stay alert. They might need you soon. These people always spill something." Rita continued down the hallway, but she couldn't stop thinking about that piano. She'd loved music once more than anything else in the world. She'd been good at it too, really good. Her teachers said she had a gift. She'd practiced 8 hours a day, sometimes more. Her fingers had been young and strong then, flying across the keys like they had wings. But life had other plans. Her father died suddenly when she was 23. Heart attack, the doctors said. One day he was there, the next day he wasn't. And with him went all the money for her education. The conservatory was expensive, and her mother couldn't afford it alone. Rita had 2 younger brothers who needed to eat, who needed clothes and school supplies. So she'd made a choice. She'd put away her dreams of being a concert pianist and found work. Any work. First in Buenos Aires, then later in New York, where she'd heard immigrants could build better lives. She'd cleaned houses, worked in restaurants, taken care of other people's children. She'd sent money home every month without fail, even when it meant she ate rice and beans for weeks at a time. Her brothers had graduated from university because of her sacrifices. They had good jobs now, families of their own. They told Rita she was a hero, but she didn't feel like one. Heroes got parades and medals. She got a sore back and hands that cracked from cleaning chemicals. And sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep, she wondered what might have been. What if her father hadn't died? What if she'd finished her training? Would she be the one sitting at that beautiful piano tonight, playing for the wealthy audience? Would she be wearing an elegant dress instead of a cleaning uniform? But those thoughts didn't help anything. They just made her sad. Rita had learned long ago not to dwell on the past. The past couldn't feed your family or pay your rent. You had to keep moving forward one day at a time, one floor at a time. She heard someone calling for champagne in the main room, heard the burst of laughter that followed. Rita gripped her mop handle a little tighter and got back to work. There would be spills soon enough. There always were. The party was getting louder. Robert had finished his 4th glass of champagne, and everything felt pleasantly blurry around the edges. His guests were having a good time, which meant the evening was a success. But there was still no sign of the pianist he'd hired. "This is ridiculous," Robert muttered to his assistant, a thin man named Bradley who always looked worried about something. "Call him again." Bradley put his phone to his ear, listened, then shook his head. Still no answer. "I think his phone is off." Robert felt his jaw tighten. He hated when things didn't go according to plan. The piano sat there in the corner, silent and useless. Several guests had asked about the music. One woman had even joked that maybe Robert should play something himself, which was absurd. He'd taken exactly 3 piano lessons as a child before quitting, because he found it boring. He walked toward the bar, needing another drink. That's when he saw her. The cleaning lady was standing near the service door, half hidden behind a marble column. She wasn't doing anything wrong, just standing there with her cart. But she was looking at the piano with an expression that Robert couldn't quite read. It wasn't the way his guests looked at expensive things with that calculating gaze of people mentally adding up the cost. This was different, softer, almost like she was looking at an old friend. The champagne made Robert feel bold and reckless. An idea formed in his mind. The kind of idea that seems hilarious when you've had too much to drink. He raised his voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Hey, you there." Rita turned, startled. She'd been lost in thought, remembering a piece of music she used to play. Now suddenly everyone in that part of the room was looking at her. Her heart started beating faster. "Yes, sir," she said quietly, gripping her cart handle. Robert gestured grandly toward the piano, a big smile on his face. "Our pianist seems to have gotten lost. Why don't you play something for us while we wait?" There was a moment of confused silence. Then someone laughed. Then someone else. Soon half the room was chuckling, thinking this was another one of Robert's provocative jokes. He was known for saying outrageous things at parties, for pushing boundaries just to see people's reactions. Rita felt her face grow hot. She'd experienced moments like this before. Times when wealthy people treated her like she was invisible or stupid, or there for their entertainment. Usually she just smiled politely and went back to work. It was easier that way, safer. But something about this moment felt different. Maybe it was seeing that beautiful piano sitting unused. Maybe it was thinking about all those years she'd given up, all those dreams she'd buried. Maybe it was just tiredness after a long day. Whatever it was, instead of backing away, Rita heard herself speak. "Are you serious, Mr. Hayes?" The laughter died down a bit. Robert was surprised she'd responded at all. Most of the cleaning staff never said more than "yes, sir" or "no, sir" to him. He was feeling theatrical now, playing to his audience, absolutely serious. He said, spreading his arms wide, "I'm sure you're just as qualified as our missing pianist. Maybe you took lessons as a child." More laughter rippled through the crowd. "Come on, don't be shy. Give us a song." Some of the guests looked uncomfortable now. A woman in a red dress whispered something to her husband. But others were smiling, waiting to see what would happen next. It was like watching a performance, and they were the audience. Rita stood very still. Inside her chest, her heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. She could just apologize and leave. That would be the smart thing to do. Keep her head down, keep her job, go home and forget this ever happened. But there was that piano, that gorgeous, perfect instrument. And here was this man in his expensive suit, so confident and careless, treating her like a joke without knowing anything about her. Without knowing who she'd been, what she'd sacrificed, what she still carried inside her. She thought about her daughter, studying engineering at college. Rita always told her to be brave, to stand up for herself, to never let anyone make her feel small. How could she tell her daughter those things if she didn't do them herself? Rita let go of her cart. The movement was slow, deliberate. She took one step toward the piano, then another. "Okay," she said simply. The room got quieter. People turned to look, curious now. Robert's smile widened. This was turning out to be more entertaining than he'd expected. He'd have a great story to tell at the office on Monday. Rita walked across the marble floor, very aware of her plain uniform, her worn sneakers, the cleaning supplies clipped to her belt. She felt like she was walking through a dream, or maybe a nightmare. The distance from the service door to the piano couldn't have been more than 30 feet, but it felt like miles. When she reached the piano bench, she stopped. Up close, the instrument was even more beautiful. She could see the grain in the wood, the perfect alignment of the keys. She reached out and gently touched the surface. It was cool and smooth under her fingertips. "Well," Robert said from behind her, his voice amused. "We're waiting." Rita looked down at her hands. They were the hands of a cleaning woman now, rough and reddened from chemicals and hot water. Her knuckles were swollen. There were small scars from paper cuts and burns. These weren't the hands of a concert pianist anymore, or were they? She slowly removed her rubber gloves, peeling them off one finger at a time. Several people in the crowd exchanged glances. This was getting awkward. Maybe the joke had gone too far. Rita sat down on the bench and adjusted her position, the way she'd been taught 30 years ago. Her back straight but not rigid, her feet flat on the floor, her hands hovering above the keys. For a moment, she just sat there, feeling the weight of all those eyes on her back. She hadn't played a real piano in almost 3 decades. Sometimes, late at night in her tiny apartment, she would practice on the kitchen table, her fingers moving through invisible scales and arpeggios. Her daughter used to watch her when she was little, fascinated by the strange silent concert her mother performed. "Mom, what are you playing?" she'd ask. "Something beautiful, mija," Rita would answer. "Something from a long time ago." But a kitchen table wasn't a piano, and memory wasn't the same as muscle. What if she'd forgotten? What if her hands no longer remembered what her mind still knew? What if she sat here and embarrassed herself in front of all these people who already thought she was a joke? Rita closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about her father, who'd loved listening to her practice. She thought about her old teacher in Buenos Aires, and stern woman who'd told her she had real talent, that she could be great if she worked hard enough. She thought about all the hours she'd spent practicing, the calluses she'd developed, the way music had made her feel alive. And then she thought about something her father used to say. "Rita, music isn't in your fingers. It's in your heart. The fingers just know how to let it out." She let her hands fall gently onto the keys. The room held its breath. Rita began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative, like someone testing cold water with their toes. But then something happened. Her hands remembered. 30 years fell away like autumn leaves. The rough skin, the swollen knuckles, the scars. None of it mattered. Her fingers found the keys like they'd never left, moving with a grace and certainty that came from thousands of hours of practice long ago. She played Rachmaninoff. She didn't choose it consciously. It was just there waiting in her fingers, the same piece she'd been preparing when her father died, when everything fell apart, the piece she'd never gotten to perform until now. The music filled the penthouse like water filling a pool, rising and rising until it surrounded everything. Behind her closed eyes, Rita wasn't in a billionaire's apartment anymore. She was 22 again, playing in the conservatory hall, the afternoon sun streaming through tall windows. Her father was in the audience, smiling. The transformation happened in seconds. One moment, Rita was just a cleaning lady in a gray uniform sitting at a piano. The next moment, she was something else entirely. Something nobody in that room had expected to see. Her fingers moved across the keys with impossible speed and precision. The notes cascaded like a waterfall, each one perfect, each one exactly where it needed to be. This wasn't someone who'd taken a few piano lessons as a kid. This was someone who knew music the way fish know water, the way birds know sky. The conversation in the room stopped mid-sentence. A woman holding a champagne glass froze with it halfway to her lips. A man who'd been laughing at something went silent, his mouth still open. Everyone turned toward the piano. Robert stood near the bar, his smile fading like ice melting in the sun. He'd expected her to play Chopsticks or Happy Birthday or maybe nothing at all. He'd expected to laugh, for everyone to laugh, and then she'd go back to her cart and the evening would continue. That's what was supposed to happen. This was not what was supposed to happen. The music grew louder, more complex. Rita's entire body moved with it now, swaying slightly, her shoulders rising and falling with the rhythm. Her eyes were closed, her face completely peaceful. She looked like someone who'd finally come home after a long journey. A young woman near the front pulled out her phone and started recording. Then another person did the same. Soon 6 phones were pointed at the piano, capturing this impossible moment. The cleaning lady who could play like a master. The piece Rita had chosen was famous among classical music lovers, but most of the people in this room didn't know its name. They just knew it was beautiful, heartbreaking. The kind of music that reaches inside your chest and squeezes. Some parts were soft and gentle like a mother's lullaby. Other parts crashed like ocean waves against rocks, powerful and unstoppable. Robert moved closer almost without realizing he was doing it. He couldn't take his eyes off Rita's hands. They were damaged hands, workers' hands with short, unpolished nails and rough skin. But they moved like they belonged to someone else, someone graceful and refined. It was like watching magic happen right in front of him. A man in an expensive tuxedo stood next to Robert. His name was Vincent Park, a music producer who'd worked with some of the biggest names in classical music. He was shaking his head slowly, his eyes wide. "That's Rachmaninoff," Vincent whispered. "Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the hardest pieces in existence. I've heard professional pianists struggle with this." "Who is she?" someone else asked. Nobody knew. She was just the cleaning lady, the invisible woman who emptied trash cans and mopped floors. Except she wasn't just anything. She was extraordinary, and they'd never noticed. Rita played on, lost in the music. Her fingers remembered everything. Every chord progression, every delicate trill, every thundering crescendo. It was all still there, locked away inside her for 30 years, waiting. In this moment, she wasn't thinking about her daughter's tuition or her sore back or the fact that she'd need to take 3 buses to get home tonight. She was just playing, just being who she really was underneath the uniform. The music told a story. Anyone listening could feel it, even if they couldn't put it into words. It was a story about loss and longing, about dreams deferred but not destroyed. It was about beauty surviving in harsh conditions, like a flower growing through concrete. It was Rita's story, played out in notes and chords for everyone to hear. A woman in the crowd started crying. She wasn't even sure why. She just felt something break open inside her chest, something she'd kept locked up for too long. She wasn't the only one. Several people had tears running down their faces, not bothering to wipe them away. Robert felt something strange happening in his own chest. It was uncomfortable, like something cracking. He'd built his entire life on being smart, being successful, being better than other people. He'd made billions by understanding technology and markets and consumer behavior. He'd thought he understood the world. But he hadn't understood this. He hadn't understood that the woman who cleaned his building could contain this much talent, this much beauty. He hadn't understood that people weren't what they appeared to be on the surface. He'd looked at Rita 1,000 times and never really seen her. The shame hit him like a physical blow. He'd made a joke out of her. He'd tried to humiliate her in front of all these people for his own amusement. And she'd responded not with anger or tears, but with grace. With art. With a dignity he wasn't sure he possessed himself. The music built toward its climax. Rita's hands flew across the keys, her whole body engaged in the effort. This was the part that separated amateurs from masters. The part where technique alone wasn't enough. You needed something more. You needed soul. She had it. The final section of the piece was like a thunderstorm and a sunrise happening at the same time. Powerful and gentle, dark and bright, sad and hopeful all at once. Rita's face showed the strain now. Her arms were tired. Her back hurt. She wasn't 22 anymore, and her body reminded her of that fact with every movement. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. This moment was 30 years in the making. Every floor she'd mopped. Every toilet she'd cleaned. Every time she'd swallowed her pride and accepted being invisible. It had all been leading here. To this piano in this moment with these people finally seeing her. The last notes hung in the air like stars. Rita played them so softly they were almost whispers, the opposite of the thunder that had come before. Then slowly, carefully, she lifted her hands from the keys and placed them in her lap. The penthouse was completely silent. Rita opened her eyes. For a moment she didn't move. She just sat there breathing hard, feeling her heartbeat gradually slow down. It was over. She'd done it. After 30 years of silence, she'd played again. She stood up from the bench, her legs a little shaky. When she turned around to face the room, she expected to see confusion, maybe embarrassment. She expected people to look away, to pretend nothing unusual had happened. Instead, she saw something she'd never seen before in all her years of cleaning buildings and serving wealthy people. She saw respect. Nobody moved for what felt like a long time but was probably only 5 seconds. Then someone started clapping, slow, deliberate claps that rang out in the silent room. Robert looked over and saw it was Vincent Park, the music producer, his expression serious and amazed. Then someone else joined in. Then another person. Then suddenly everyone was clapping. And then they were standing, rising from their seats in their conversations, their champagne glasses forgotten. The entire room gave Rita a standing ovation. Their applause building and building until it filled the penthouse like the music had filled it moments before. Rita stood there in her cleaning uniform, her rubber gloves dangling from her belt, and watched them clap for her. Some people weren't just clapping. They were cheering, calling out words of praise. Several were still crying. The phones were still recording, capturing this moment that none of them would ever forget. Robert stood frozen near the bar. He couldn't clap. His hands wouldn't work. He felt like he'd been turned to stone, forced to watch the consequences of his own carelessness. This woman had given them all a gift, and he'd tried to make her into a joke. Rita's eyes found his across the room. For a moment, they just looked at each other. He expected to see anger there, or satisfaction, or contempt. But there was none of that. Just a quiet sadness and maybe a little pity. That look hurt worse than anger would have. It told him she understood exactly what he was feeling, and she felt sorry for him. Sorry that he lived in a world where he couldn't see people like her. Sorry that his wealth and success had made him blind. The applause continued, wave after wave of it, washing over Rita like rain. The applause seemed to go on forever. Rita stood by the piano, not quite sure what to do with her hands. She wasn't used to being the center of attention like this. For 3 years, she'd perfected the art of being invisible in this building. Now everyone was looking at her, really looking at her, maybe for the first time. Finally, the clapping began to fade. People wiped their eyes, laughed nervously at their own emotions, took sips of their champagne. The spell was breaking slowly, like waking up from a vivid dream. Robert forced himself to move. His legs felt heavy as he walked toward Rita. Every step was harder than the last. He'd faced business rivals, angry investors, tough negotiations worth billions of dollars. None of that had been as difficult as crossing this room right now. When he reached her, he didn't know what to say. All his usual confidence, his smooth talk, his clever jokes, none of it worked here. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He started, then stopped. His throat felt tight. I don't know what to say. Rita looked at him quietly. Up close, he could see the tiredness in her face, the lines around her eyes. She looked at him the way a teacher might look at a student who disappointed her. Not angry, just sad. You don't need to say anything, Mr. Hayes, she said softly. Her accent was thicker now. Maybe because she was tired, maybe because she'd stopped trying to hide it. Music speaks louder than words. She bent down to pick up her rubber gloves from where she'd left them on the piano bench. The gesture was like a punch to Robert's stomach. She was going back to work. Back to being invisible. Back to cleaning up after people who didn't see her. Wait, he said. Please wait. Rita paused but didn't straighten up. She held her gloves in one hand, waiting. Before Robert could say anything else, a woman pushed through the crowd. She was in her 60s, wearing a black dress and pearls. Her hair was silver and pulled back in an elegant bun. She moved with the kind of confidence that comes from years of being important in your field. Excuse me? The woman said, her voice cultured and precise. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to know. Where did you train? Rita straightened up, surprised. I'm sorry, who are you? Helen Fitzgerald, the woman said, extending her hand. I'm the director of the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. Rita's eyes went wide. She knew that name. Every serious musician knew that name. Helen Fitzgerald had been a concert pianist herself, before becoming one of the most respected orchestra directors in the world. Rita shook her hand, very aware of how rough her own palm must feel. I trained at the Buenos Aires Conservatory, Rita said, a long time ago. Another lifetime. Buenos Aires, Helen repeated, nodding. That explains it. They have an excellent program there. Or they did. Do you still perform? Rita almost laughed. No, I haven't performed in 30 years. I clean offices now. I clean this building. She said it simply, without shame but without pride either. Just stating a fact. The sky is blue. Water is wet. I clean buildings for a living. Helen's face showed no judgment, only curiosity. Why did you stop? With talent like yours? It was a question Rita had been asked before, though not often. Most people in her life now didn't know she'd ever played piano. Her daughter knew, but Rita rarely talked about it. What was the point in dwelling on the past? But something about tonight made her want to answer honestly. My father died when I was 23, she said. He had a heart attack. Very sudden. He was only 52. She paused, remembering. He was the one who paid for my lessons, my schooling. When he died, the money stopped. I had a mother and 2 younger brothers to support. Someone had to work, so you gave it up, Helen said quietly, to take care of your family. It wasn't really a choice, Rita said with a small shrug. You do what you have to do. My brothers finished university because of the money I sent home. They have good jobs now, good lives. That's what matters. And what about your life? Helen asked. Rita didn't answer right away. She looked down at her hands, at the rubber gloves she was holding. I have a good life. I have a daughter. She's in college studying engineering. She's going to build bridges. She smiled a little. Real ones, not the kind in music. More people had gathered around them now, listening. Robert stood to the side, forgotten for the moment. He watched Rita talk about her life, her sacrifices with such simple dignity. No self-pity, no bitterness. Just acceptance of the cards she'd been dealt. A man in the crowd spoke up. That piece you played, that was Rachmaninoff, wasn't it? The second concerto? Rita nodded. Yes, the first movement. That's incredibly difficult, the man said. I'm a pianist myself, and I've been working on that piece for 2 years. You played it from memory, after 30 years of not playing. I was preparing it when my father died, Rita explained. It was going to be my graduation performance at the conservatory. I practiced it every day for months. I guess some things you don't forget, even when you try to. There was something in the way she said that last part that made several people look away, even when you try to forget, because sometimes remembering hurt too much. Vincent Park, the music producer, stepped forward. Have you kept up with your playing at all? Practiced at home? Rita shook her head. I don't have a piano. My apartment is very small. Sometimes I practice on my kitchen table. She demonstrated, moving her fingers in the air like she was playing invisible keys. My daughter used to watch me when she was little. She thought I was crazy. Rita smiled at the memory. Maybe I was a little crazy. You're not crazy, Helen said firmly. You're a musician. We all do things that seem strange to other people. She paused, studying Rita carefully. I have a question for you. Would you be interested in working with music again? Not performing necessarily, but something in the field? Rita looked confused. What do you mean? We have programs at the Philharmonic, Helen explained. Community outreach, education, bringing music to neighborhoods that don't usually get access to it. We need people who understand both music and struggle. People who know what it's like to have talent but not opportunity. She paused. People like you. I don't understand, Rita said slowly. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a conversation, Helen said. About possibilities. About using your gift in a different way than you might have imagined. She pulled a business card from her small purse and handed it to Rita. Call me tomorrow. We'll talk. Rita took the card like it might disappear if she held it too tight. She stared at it, at the elegant lettering, at Helen's name and title. Director, New York Philharmonic. It felt surreal, like any moment she'd wake up and find herself back in her apartment, her alarm clock ringing, time to go clean buildings. Robert finally found his voice again. Helen's right, he said, and she's not the only one. I want to help too. Rita looked at him. There was still that sadness in her eyes, that disappointment. It made him want to look away, but he forced himself to hold her gaze. Mr. Hayes, you don't need to help me because you feel bad, Rita said gently. I'm okay. I've been okay for 30 years. It's not about feeling bad, Robert said, though that was partly a lie. He did feel bad. Terrible, actually. It's about recognizing something real when you see it. I've spent this whole evening with people who are famous or rich or powerful, and you know what? You're the most impressive person here. He meant it. He was surprised by how much he meant it. You worked cleaning jobs for 30 years to support your family. He continued. You sacrificed your dreams so other people could have theirs. And after all that, after I tried to humiliate you in front of everyone, you sat down and created something beautiful. He shook his head. I couldn't do that. Most people couldn't do that. Rita was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You know what the hardest part was? It wasn't giving up performing. It wasn't the years of hard work. She looked around the beautiful penthouse at all the wealth on display. It was feeling invisible, walking past people every day and knowing they don't see you, that they look right through you like your furniture. Her words landed like stones in water, sending ripples through the crowd. Several people shifted uncomfortably. How many times had they walked past Rita without acknowledging her? How many times had they ignored the person cleaning their office, serving their food, driving their cab? I see you now, Robert said quietly. I promise you I see you now. Rita nodded slowly. She believed him. The question was whether seeing was enough or if something more needed to happen. If this moment was going to be just a story people told at parties or if it was going to actually change something. The party didn't last much longer after that. People stayed for another hour, but something had shifted. The conversation was different now. Quieter, more thoughtful. Several guests came up to Rita before they left, shaking her hand, telling her how moved they'd been by her playing. She accepted their words with grace, though part of her still felt like she was dreaming. When the last guest finally left, Rita gathered her cleaning supplies. There was still work to do. Champagne glasses to collect, floors to mop, bathrooms to check. The party might be over, but her shift wasn't. Rita, wait. Robert approached her again, and this time he looked different, more humble, less sure of himself. You're not cleaning tonight. I'll pay you for the full shift, but please, just go home. You've done enough. But the mess, Rita started. I'll hire someone else to handle it tomorrow, Robert interrupted. I'll call a cleaning service. You just go home and rest, Rita wanted to argue. She needed the money. But she was so tired. Her hands ached and her back hurt from sitting at the piano bench. She wasn't used to that kind of playing anymore. Her body would remind her of it for days. Thank you, Mr. Hayes, she said finally. Robert, he said. Please, just call me Robert. She nodded but didn't say his name. Some distances took longer to cross than others. As Rita rode the elevator down 40 floors, she looked at Helen's business card again. New York Philharmonic. She traced the letters with her thumb. Could this be real? Could something actually come from tonight? Or would it fade like dreams fade in the morning light? When she got home to her small apartment in Queens, it was nearly midnight. Her daughter was still awake, studying at the kitchen table, textbooks spread out everywhere. "Mom, you're late." "I was worried," she said, looking up. Then she saw her mother's face. "What happened?" "Are you okay?" Rita sat down heavily in the other chair. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. How do you explain a night like this? How do you put it into words? "Mija," she said finally. "I played piano tonight." Her daughter's eyes went wide. "What? Where?" "At Mr. Hayes's apartment. The billionaire who owns the building." Rita laughed a little, the sound halfway between joy and disbelief. "He asked me to play as a joke." "And I did. And everyone listened." She told her daughter the whole story. The party, the missing pianist, Robert's challenge the moment she sat down at that beautiful piano. Her daughter listened with her mouth open, occasionally interrupting with questions. When Rita finished, they both just sat there in the small kitchen, the fluorescent light humming above them. "Mom," her daughter said slowly, "do you realize what this means?" "People recorded it. It's probably already online." She was right. By the next morning, videos of Rita's performance were everywhere. Someone had posted it with the caption, "Cleaning lady plays Rachmaninoff at billionaire's party," and everyone's jaws dropped. The video went viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments. Some comments made Rita cry. People saying they were inspired, that they'd given up on their own dreams too soon, that her story reminded them it's never too late. Other comments focused on the class divide, on how many talented people go unnoticed because of their jobs or circumstances. A few were negative, people saying it was fake or staged, but most were overwhelmingly positive. Rita called Helen the next day, her hands shaking as she dialed the number. They met for coffee in Manhattan. Helen brought a colleague, a woman named Patricia who ran the Philharmonic's education programs. They talked for 2 hours. The job they offered wasn't about performing. It was about teaching and coordinating. They wanted Rita to help develop programs that brought music education to immigrant communities, to schools in poor neighborhoods, to places where kids had talent but no opportunity. She'd work with musicians, help plan concerts, visit schools, mentor students who reminded her of her younger self. The salary was more than double what she made cleaning. She'd have health insurance, retirement benefits, an office with her name on the door. "I don't have a degree," Rita said. "I never finished the conservatory." "You have something better than a degree," Helen told her. "You have lived experience. You understand what these kids are going through because you've been there. That's worth more than any piece of paper." Rita took the job. She gave notice at the cleaning company, and her supervisor didn't believe her at first. "You're leaving to work at the Philharmonic?" "You're joking." "I'm not joking," Rita said. "Not anymore." Robert did help too in his own way. He reached out to Rita a week after the party and asked if they could meet. They had lunch at a quiet restaurant, and he apologized properly this time. Not the rushed apology of a man embarrassed in front of his guests, but a real one, thoughtful and genuine. "I've been thinking a lot about that night," he said. "About how I treated you. About how I've probably treated a lot of people without realizing it." "We all make mistakes," Rita said. "Maybe," Robert agreed. "But some mistakes teach you things. That night taught me that I've been looking at the world wrong, measuring people by the wrong things." He created a scholarship fund, the Rita Alvarez Music Scholarship, for students over 30 who wanted to return to studying music but couldn't afford it. People who'd had to give up their dreams for practical reasons, for family, for survival. He funded it with $2 million initially, enough to support dozens of students. "You don't have to do this," Rita told him when he showed her the paperwork. "I want to," he said. "Besides, it's not charity. It's investment. Who knows how many other people like you are out there, working jobs that hide their talents. Maybe some of them will get a second chance now." 3 months after the party, Rita stood backstage at a small community theater in the Bronx. The Philharmonic was hosting a free concert for local families, many of them immigrants like Rita had been. She'd helped organize it, had helped select the music, had visited schools to invite the children. Now she was going to introduce the concert. Helen had asked her to say a few words before the orchestra performed. Rita walked onto the stage wearing a simple blue dress her daughter had helped her pick out. The theater was packed. Families filled every seat, children wiggling with excitement, parents holding babies. These were her people. People who worked hard, who sacrificed, who didn't often get invited to fancy concerts in Manhattan. "Good evening," Rita said into the microphone, her accent clear and strong. She didn't try to hide it anymore. "My name is Rita Alvarez, and I want to tell you a story about a piano." She told them about that night, about being a cleaning lady, about the joke, about sitting down and playing for the first time in 30 years. The audience listened, silent and attentive. Some people nodded, recognizing themselves in her story. "I thought my music was over," Rita said. "I thought when I gave up the conservatory, when I put away my dreams to take care of my family, that was the end of that part of my life. But I was wrong." She paused, looking out at all those faces. "Dreams don't die. They just wait. Sometimes for a very long time. But if you're lucky, if you stay ready, they come back." She gestured to the orchestra behind her. "Tonight, these wonderful musicians are going to play for you. They're going to play beautiful music, and you're going to hear it for free. Because everyone deserves beauty in their lives. Everyone deserves art. It doesn't matter how much money you have or what job you do or where you come from." After the concert, parents came up to thank her. A woman told her she used to sing in her home country, but had stopped when she came to America. "Maybe I'll start again," she said, tears in her eyes. A teenage boy said he'd been thinking about quitting violin because his family couldn't afford a good instrument. "But I won't quit now," he said. You didn't quit. Rita went home that night on the subway, tired but happy. Her daughter had come to the concert, had watched her mother speak on stage with such pride in her eyes. They rode together in comfortable silence, the train rattling beneath them. "You did it, Mom," her daughter said finally. "You got your dream back." Rita thought about that. Was this her old dream? Not exactly. She wasn't performing at Carnegie Hall or recording albums. She wasn't famous. But maybe this was better. Maybe this was the dream that had been waiting for her all along. The one that could only exist because of everything she'd been through. She still kept her old cleaning uniform in her closet. Not to wear anymore, but to remember. To remind herself of where she'd been, what she'd survived, how far she'd traveled. It hung next to her new work clothes, a permanent part of her story. Sometimes, late at night, she'd practice on the piano the Philharmonic had arranged for her to use in their practice rooms. Her hands were getting stronger again, more flexible. The calluses from cleaning were fading, replaced by the different calluses that came from playing music. And sometimes, while she played, she thought about Robert and that party. About how one moment of humiliation had turned into something beautiful. About how the things that hurt us can also transform us, if we're brave enough to let them. Life was strange that way, full of surprises, full of second chances you never saw coming. Rita played on, her fingers dancing across the keys, making music that no one but the empty room could hear. But that was okay. She wasn't playing for an audience anymore. She was playing for herself.